Good evening, everyone. My name is Lori Gagan. I'm joined here this evening with my dear friend and colleague, Tracy Halverson. Phil Lyman will be joining us here momentarily, but Tracy and I thought we would go ahead and get started. I kind of wanted to ask a few things on SB 54 so that Tracy would be able to explain it for those of you who still might be a little bit confused on SB 54. So Tracy, so the Senate bill SB 54 was enacted in Utah in 2014. It reformed the state's candidate nomination process by introducing a dual path system. And part of that dual path system was the signature gathering route that Spencer Cox did. So SB4 introduced an alternative method which allowed him to secure a spot on the primary ballot by collecting a specified number of voter signatures, bypassing the convention process. So, for our listeners, can you go in a little more in depth on that? Trying to keep it simple for people who are still trying to understand SB 54.
Yes, so that is how they are applying SB 54. But in all purpose, I think when they started SB 54, they really did have the intention of trying to protect the convention. But what happened was it was written so complicated, it's been twisted up and it was misapplied. And in my opinion, certain individuals know it's being misapplied, but just didn't say anything. And so, for example, I'll have Leighton bring up this first clip in a minute, but it only had to do 4 things. And originally, it started out as the convention system, the caucus system had to be 2 days. That was like the first one. And then they wanted an absentee or an alternate delegate provision, and people in the political parties, they were going to let unaffiliated people vote in your primary, and then they wanted to try to implement the threshold. And you can see in this clip that nowhere in this clip does Kurt Bramble say that SB 54 requires a party to allow signature gathering into their internal proceedings. So if you want to go ahead and play that, Leighton.
And you know what, Tracy, when we come back, can you just tell me a little bit more about Kurt Bramble when this is done?
Yes.
It starts with the headwaters of the electoral process, the caucus, and under 54, and these provisions can be found on line 791 forward in the bill. It's where they define a qualified party. If a political party would agree voluntarily to provide a 2-day window for citizens to vote for delegates at the caucus, that would dramatically increase the opportunity for citizens to participate, consistent with the original intent of the Count My Vote proponents. Number 2, the parties would have to adopt a policy of either allowing absentee balloting for a delegate that couldn't attend a convention, or in the alternative, an alternate delegate, like both political parties have for their national conventions, so that the strength of the voice of the precinct is increased at convention. Third, unaffiliated voters, the single largest block of voters in the state of Utah. A party would have to allow unaffiliated voters to vote in their primary. This doesn't mean crossover voting with Democrats voting in a Republican primary, but that vast number of citizens who are unaffiliated, today they can walk into the polling place, ask for a ballot in a primary, and if they're not affiliated with the Republican Party, they can check a box, get the ballot, and cast a vote. This would eliminate that check a box requirement and say that because all citizens pay for the primaries, that we shouldn't exclude the largest block of folks simply because they refuse to affiliate with the party. It doesn't go so far as to open up any party's primary to members of the opposing party. Today you have to unaffiliate 5 days prior to the primary to be able to cross over and vote in the Republican primary. This doesn't change that. But by opening the primary to allow unaffiliated voters, that goes directly to citizen participation. It's ironic, in Count My Vote's press release, they said that every citizen should have a right to vote for any qualified candidate. Senators, we have that in the law today. If an individual that is qualified under the Utah Constitution to run for office, or the U.S. Constitution if it's a federal seat, if they file as an unaffiliated candidate, every citizen that's registered to vote in the state can vote for that.
Looks like that was the end of the clip, unless you want me to keep trying to play it. Oh, Tracy, we can't hear you.
You hear me?
Yep, there we go.
So what? Kurt Bramble, what you want to ask me about Kurt Bramble?
Yes.
So he's a senator, and he actually did not try to go get reelected. He is now, this is his last year. He served, though, for 24 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the last thing he talks about on that clip, so he talked about the 2-day, the absentee, the unaffiliated, and then they tried to implement the threshold. You know how our party has 60%? They tried to make it so that all parties had to have a threshold of 65%. And by the end of what they do when they write Senate bills is they negotiate and trim and change things. And by the time that they were done with this Senate bill, the convention or the caucus system that was 2-day, that got nixed because all the parties said that is just too hard to do. You can't do a caucus system when you go get elected by your neighbors for 2 days. They said it was too hard to implement. And then the threshold was eliminated, so that was out. But he lists the 4 things of that bill. None of it said that you had to allow signature gatherers to your party or allow them to gather on your ballot. And the unaffiliated voters to vote in your closed primary, yes, that they added that. But during the first lawsuit that the party had, the Utah Constitution Party joined it, and they got that portion removed because it was unconstitutional. You can't just let other people vote in a closed primary on your primary ballot.
Right.
So that's who Senator Bramble is. So you can see that there was never in the intention of SB 54 being treated like it is, how they are applying it to the party today.
And what year was it? I mean, given your background, you've been following this now for a number of years. When do you think that it first started with them abusing it?
So it was passed in 2014, but it didn't become effective until 2000, I think, maybe the end of 2014. So it really wasn't in place until 2015. But during 2014, Spencer Cox, who is the governor right now, he was appointed as a lieutenant governor, Cox.
Right.
So he is the one that started right off the bat initially saying how that Senate bill was, how it applied to the candidates. Okay. And that's when all the first initial lawsuits started out. And you'll see we have a next clip of the lieutenant governor now, Deidre. Actually, she stands on the floor and testifies of how great the convention system is and how it benefited her. And that's why she was supporting Senate Bill 54, was because she was testifying that it still protected the convention and caucus system. And right now, the way they're applying it is they're applying it so that it's circumventing that system. So, Leighton, do you want to play that one?
To Senator Brambles come forward to try to correct that. So I stand very much in support of this and thank him for his efforts.
Senator Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have.
Sorry, Tracy, what were you trying to say?
Yeah, that was the wrong clip.
Oh, okay, the third clip then.
Sorry about that.
All right, this one then.
Constitutional Convention at the time that these fathers of the Constitution and fathers of our nation.
Sorry, not this one either.
That's fine. We can go ahead and play this.
Could get together and compromise and come up with solutions that were meaningful for both sides. I hold in my hand 2 copies of Senate Bill 54. One you'll vote on and the other we won't see. The Senate has voted on it and passed it to us. When I signed on to this bill, it was a much different bill than it is today. Many know me as not afraid to take on tough subjects, I guess, but also not afraid to take on difficult positions. And that's what originally SB 54 was. And then I learned, much like Madison, that when sides come together, you can get some of what you want and some of what you don't want, but combined, you're better than either effort would be alone. But only time would tell whether or not that effort will be rewarded with increased participation and increased involvement by citizens in their process. You know what the bill is. There are alternatives in the bill. One is a signature path to a direct primary held only within the parties. The other is an alternative to that path where you can collect some signatures depending on the varying offices that are offered in the state to run for to your heart's content. And upon arriving at those signatures, you can then qualify for the ballot, or you can go through the current historical nominating process of the convention. And through both of those processes, we are hoping to improve and increase voter turnout and voter involvement. I think a good.
So Tracy, let me start off, let's talk about this. So with really what he was saying, the first governor who was elected after SB 54 was passed was the Republican candidate Gary Herbert. However, Gary Herbert went the traditional way in the traditional caucus convention. Am I correct in saying that? So then is it Spencer Cox who was the first governor then to go out and buy his way onto the ballot in regards to SB 54?
No, he wasn't. What it essentially did is it created a business for somebody just to get signatures. Like it created someone's business, and that is their business, is to go get signatures and for these candidates, and they get a lot of money. I think Spencer paid over $170,000. I could be wrong, but it once they passed it and they started applying it like this, I think they saw that they had power and that they could not get unseated now. And so everybody started kind of using it because it was essentially just almost every one of them won that would gather signatures.
Well, it's a way, if you have financial money, capital, you have money, it's an easy way to get yourself on a ballot. I mean, we all know what happened at the convention. You know, Spencer Cox didn't really do a lot of marketing, advertising, didn't really see a lot of his signs except going towards St. George. But he went into the convention knowing that he had funded, there was funds put in, so he was automatically on there. I mean, to me, it's kind of disgraceful because even the second time that Phil came on stage, Spencer Cox was nowhere to be found. But Tell me about the importance of the video that Leighton just played,
So
in your opinion.
that was Dan McKay, and he's actually my senator, and he was the House sponsor of it. And you can tell the intent of the original passing of it, and it was you have three processes. When they say uh, ballot, a lot of people get confused and confuse it with primary ballot. And it's actually the general ballot is what they're talking about, because you have to prove, in order for a state to show that you have a median support, they usually have you gather signatures. So like if you're an independent, you would go gather signatures. I think it's 1,000, and you would still get on the general ballot. You're just showing that you've got some kind of support. This bill was never meant to be applied like it was. They even went back the next year and did some cleanup on it and tweaked it a little bit to try to make it more clear that the signature gathering route was never meant to be applied this way. The law provides that you still go through the convention process for a Republican Party, and it still went the same way as it always had before. That's why every court case came back and said it's not unconstitutional, it's not hurting you. But you have the lieutenant governor who would fight the Republican Party chairs if they tried to say no, put those candidates can't be on our ballot, that he would just ignore them and add the ballots or add the names on the primary ballot, even if they were disqualified at the convention. And
Okay.
so, Leighton, will you bring up that one link with the code? So right here on this primary election, this part may not be governed. Little feedback. This part may not be rude to govern regular procedures registered part.
Yeah,
We've got some feedback.
Leighton,
Leighton, any suggestion?
Let's try that
Try
again.
that again, Tracy.
Okay. Maybe Leighton.
Yeah, you want me to read that for you?
Yeah, will you mute?
All right, so primary elections, part one. This part shall be constructed liberally so as to ensure full opportunity for persons to become candidates and for voters to express their choice. Part two. This part may not be construed to govern or regulate the internal procedures of a registered political party, enacted by Chapter 1, 1994 General Session.
So you can take it back. Part 4 of that section, it states right there that it's not supposed to be construed to mess with the internal procedures of our party. So they've known for a long time that this law has been misapplied, and nobody said anything. I think what happened was they saw the power of it and that somebody was making money collecting signatures, and they just let it go. But it's Spencer Cox that has been the original misapplication, and then the Lieutenant Governor Deidre right now just pushed it even further with putting Spencer Cox onto the ballot. They were disqualified on the ballot, and they should have never been on those ballots.
Mute myself. And so that's part of it, is why Phil is doing what he's doing with SCOTUS. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So, in your opinion, why is this unfair to people like myself, the voters who actually wanted our voices heard and voted for Phil Lyman, obviously at the state convention where Phil Lyman got 67.54%. So they spoke there, but now we're in this, we have this issue where they are misapplying SB 54. And so now we've got, tell us a little bit about one, what happened at the Utah Supreme Court? Because what happened there, that's why it's been escalated to the United States Supreme Court.
Right. So the original lawsuits, the Utah Supreme Court was involved, and they ruled that SB 54 did not require anything of the party to change. And they said it was not unconstitutional. And so the way it was being applied, Phil filed a brief to go into the Utah Supreme Court asking for declaratory judgment. They wanted to know, hey, do you said you ruled in 2016 that this was not unconstitutional and that we did not have to change the internal proceedings of our party, but it's being applied over here. She's forcing a direct primary. Which is it? One judge denied it. You have 5 Supreme Court justices and one judge denied it. And he denied it citing a code that doesn't apply to a qualified political party. So it just denied it. And that's why we chose to go to the United States Supreme Court to ask them to actually, make a ruling on it. Can a person get a second chance once they're disqualified at the convention? And to me, that means it applies to Derek Brown too, because by him being put on the primary, he was already disqualified with like 16% is what he got at the convention. So by him circumventing and getting a second chance again for the nomination, even though the delegates said no, these two should go on and let the rest of the party members decide out of these two which one to go onto the general ballot. They added Derek Brown, and he ended up being the nominee and winning the election according to their numbers.
So he pretty much screwed Trent Staggs then.
No, his was Frank Mylar, and
Okay.
so his was Frank Mylar and Rachel Terry, I think.
Oh, yes, yes.
And then John Curtis, the same with him. He was disqualified. So it's impacting the entire nation. John Curtis is not a legitimate nominee. He was disqualified. He never qualified for the general ballot because the Utah Republican Party does not provide candidates a second chance at their nomination if they get disqualified at their nominating convention. It's just not in the rules.
Leighton, can you play that clip from Spencer Cox
talking about 60%.
So if I get 60%, I'm on the ballot. I don't have to have a primary. The rest of the Republicans in the state, 700,000 county, but statewide for Republicans, and I think it's the same for Democrats, if you get 60% of those delegates, you're the nominee, period. End of story. Okay? That's it. That's it.
So that's pretty telling. I mean, that's a tell-all right there.
Yeah. And he's the one that's been misapplying the law from the beginning, and he's a lawyer. So he
knows.
known.
And
Yeah.
so does Deidre.
And well, so does Dan McKay. And I don't understand why they didn't say anything. I mean, Kurt Bramble knew. They wrote it and they knew why they wrote it. So why wouldn't they say, why are you misapplying this, especially on the 60%? Why wouldn't they come up and say, you're treating Phil wrong? Where's the courage? What is so scary that they don't want to speak up?
Well, it's like you said, it's the poison power that's behind it all. So tell us, where does the SCOTUS stand right now? I know that Phil and they talked a little bit about it when we did a live with the auditor, Chris. And I have to say, I give Chris kudos for coming out. It was 99% Phil supporters. And I have to say, it was pretty admirable. He showed up and had the courage to show up and, have that communication with Phil. But he was shocked when you showed him the book from the Supreme Court. But where's the SCOTUS stand right now?
So it is docketed, and they have requested a response from the respondents. So from Spencer and Deidre and Rob Axton's a part of it. Um, they can waive response. I honestly don't know what they could say. Like, you have to have the state has to have a good enough reason to put rules around their ballots. So how could you say, well, we think people get a second chance. They deserve to have a second chance, and so they can circumvent the party's convention. I mean, it's their primary ballot. It's a closed ballot in Utah. It's not like it's an open primary where all these different parties have their candidates listed. It's a closed one. So I'm curious to see what concocted idea they could say, well, they deserve a second chance. Like, why would they? I don't even understand the reasoning that they could. So they could just waive it, and then the court could just go on and review it and then make a ruling. They could do it that fast. We've asked for a motion to expedite, and they have done that in the past. They've done it in Bush v. Gore. They did a review in 3 days. They had it done. And so it is possible to have it done that quickly. We also have a application that's submitted in there that says that asks for court to review and an injunction to hold off the certification of this until it's heard, until the court hears it and reviews it. So that's where we are right now. A lot of misconceptions go around about the reason why the last United States Supreme Court case that was about SB 54 didn't go. It's because people say Governor Herbert called and told them not to hear it. And that's not true. That I feel like that's a narrative to try to discourage people to never try it again. That was probably used to discourage people to never fight again against this, because they went so high and then it just didn't get heard. But you have to ask the right questions in a way. And the way that they were asking, the court could not respond because SB 54 did not do what they were saying in the court case it did. So they couldn't respond to that. They were like, it doesn't do what you're saying it did. So they couldn't take it up. It wasn't a clear case that was easy to take up and respond to. And that's my opinion, is why it didn't go all the way up.
Okay, so I have a question on that. So you mentioned something about the first place loser, which is what Dr. Fleming likes to call Spencer Cox, which is true. So first place loser, if for some reason the Supreme Court comes back and just rules that they can't go ahead and they can't validate that Spencer Cox, like maybe he is illegitimate. What happens in a situation come January?
So if they rule in favor of Phil, they remand it back down. And in the original court case with the Utah Supreme Court, he had asked to stop the general ballots from being printed. And he also asked the primary to be set aside. And everybody talks and pushes a narrative too that they never set aside an election. Well, they do, especially when there's fraud. And a counterfeit ballot was printed and mailed out, placing names on a ballot that should have never been there. They were disqualified according to the party. And so, yes, there could be that it's set aside and maybe redone, is what I'm thinking it's going to do. They'll have to redo it without the right people on the ballot, like without the candidates that were disqualified already through the primary system for at least the Republican Party.
Okay. And then in that case, I mean, I don't think none of us know who's even running the United States at this part, since Kamala and Biden are literally have disappeared. So who runs Utah in a situation like that?
There are laws in place that put in temporary people. So it'd be like this, the Senate president, I think is one of them. But you think about it, what does the governor do? I mean, what are they really doing on a day-to-day basis to
Well,
run
we
something?
probably let illegals in.
Yeah,
Probably a good example.
probably stuff that we don't need done.
Yes, of course. Okay.
So, but there is like the Senate president takes in. I not necessarily really fond of that idea either, but until we get the right elections, I mean, John Curtis is illegitimate and he's over there saying that he's going to make certain decisions. And really, it's Trent Staggs that should be the Utah senator. How can John Curtis even sit there with a straight face knowing that he's illegitimate? His votes aren't representing him. Article 4 of our Constitution promises that we get a Republican form of government. And a lot of people think Republican as a party. No, the definition of Republican is representative form of government. And that for Utah is the purest form of the Republican Party because it starts at caucus and convention. Because you start electing somebody in your neighborhood to represent you to go and help pick who the party nominee was. So it starts right at the first level. And that Article 4 was gutted by the application of SB 54 and how Governor Cox has dictated how it applied.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the audit. So we know that Phil had that that live with Chris, and he also had the live, and his name is, I know it's not Andrew. What's his name? The uh, Davis County auditor, the one that they're coming after.
Oh, the Utah County, Aaron Davidson.
Right. Okay. So, given your extensive legal background, what is your personal opinion on the audit?
My personal opinion. So I think Phil mentioned this once too. When you have internal auditors, they don't really come after you to make you look bad. They actually audit to improve processes. So they're not going to come at this audit and say, "Yeah, Spencer cheated." You know, they're not going to say that. In my opinion, he didn't get the number. He didn't get the signatures, even though the signatures doesn't matter for the Republican Party. He did not qualify for the ballot, even through a signature gathering process. So he never qualified. He didn't get it. And I feel like that they tried to make it sound as nice as they possibly could. But in my opinion, he didn't get it. And that audit just recommended processes to improve so that this wouldn't happen again.
Right. So, he didn't get it, and they're still going to allow it.
Yeah. 'Cause-
Again, first place loser. You made a mistake, but we're still going to allow it. Which, I mean, what are we teaching our children,
right.
nowadays, that you can lie, cheat, and steal your way onto anything if you're a first place loser? It's my opinion of that.
Yeah, and so the funny thing is they say, well, he did what he was supposed to. No, his recourse is sue the Davis County clerk. That's your recourse. Just because he thinks he did what he was required, no, he didn't qualify for the ballot. You don't just say, well, he did what he tried. He tried really hard. He could have done it. And just because the Davis County people stopped counting or didn't qualify properly, now just let him on the ballot. That's not how it works. His recourse in a legal world would be go sue them for failure. You're not qualified for the ballot. That was just kind of a funny situation because that's what all that was just to try to hide it and give him cover as to why he could still be on the ballot. And
Right. So, what are you seeing and hearing out in the real media, the social media world out there? Taking out KSL or Deseret, who really doesn't want to pick up anything, as we all know. But what are you seeing out there in like X and Instagram and Facebook and some of the other platforms?
people are angry and it's not going away. I think the legislature thinks that they're just going to move on and we're going to go away. We're not going away because there are over 200,000 votes that were cast for Phil in a write-in, and I don't even believe that number. I think it was more. And
Well, he
so I
made
think,
history on that too.
yes, like
And
that was
and KSL isn't even picking it up, or
no,
Deseret.
none
It's
of them
people like
do.
us that are picking it up.
So, in my opinion, this isn't going away, and they always kick the can down the road. I've noticed the legislature will always say, "Oh, we'll fix it next time. We'll fix it next time." These are consequences of uh, terrible bills, and it's like, no, we're not allowing it. There are avenues and that we can utilize. There's laws that we can utilize to fix what happened to Utah. Utah deserves a free and fair election, and we're not letting it go. So I think that's what they're just hoping that we'll just move on. And no, we're not moving on.
Well, I think there's a lot of eyes that are certainly open right now, that their voices aren't and weren't being heard on that.
Yeah, I see a lot of anger. See a lot of people upset. I know there's this forum going around uh, asking for people to list how they were harmed, and there's over 300 people that have entered in on that forum, and they describe how upset they are of how this election really went down. And you know, you've already got over 200,000 that they're upset about it, or that's why they wrote in Phil Lyman.
Right. So that's really interesting. So let's talk about that a little further. Is there anything that people like myself, people like you, I mean, you're a citizen of Utah. Do the citizens have any right to enact anything because we feel that the election was stolen due to them not using SB 54 properly? Is there anything that the citizens can do?
Yeah, they can reach out to their legislature and demand that um, the election be redone. Like they can ask for that. I think everybody's kind of waiting on this SCOTUS case, but there you can also, if you wanted to, you can sue yourself. Voters, just because voters, even if you weren't even affiliated, because I talked to the Constitution Party, a member of that party, and they said that they felt harmed because when you mess with one candidate, it impacts the ballot. And that is true, even for the Democrats, because instead of going up against an incumbent, you know, Brian King could have been going up against a new guy, and you never know. I mean, I know it's a dominant state of Republicans, but that you don't feel like you're getting a real shake, like if you want, everybody wants a real contest. They don't want some fake that didn't even count, because this vote did not count. It was all made up.
Well, I mean, even when we look at SB 54, I mean, why in the hell? And I know they do some underhanded stuff, between the House and the Senate, because I've sat in on some of the House bills, just kind of listening in on some of the Zoom meetings. And it just seems like it's so fair that you have a group, and so many of them have this poison power scenario in their head that, hey, look at me. Hey, look at me. I can go out and I can make laws for the state of Utah, like the flag initiative,
Mhm.
without asking the citizens of Utah, what do they want? And those citizens of Utah pay their salaries.
Uh-huh.
And it's just kind of like, you know, really what's going on with, the presidency. It's, hey, here's me. I'm going to pass this law for you. I don't give a crap if you voted me in or not. I don't need to listen to you. And it's just so sad that we're living in a state of just corruption.
Right. And SB 54 really, I mean, I'm not saying wasn't corruption prior to that, but SB 54 sure allowed a lot of things to go on because, I mean, if you can't beat the system, if the cheat is so big that you can't beat it ever, what you would get that power, that poisoned power. You'd be like, haha, you can't unseat me because all I have to do is gather signatures and I'll win, you know?
Well, and it's just so unfair to the citizens,
Yes.
that, and I'm sure there are some underhanded, I think Phil is going to be joining us, but I do know that there's some other underhanded things going on right now where they're trying to get some other stuff like for SB 54 change. We talked about that before, but let's see if Phil is in the house. I see his Phil, are you there?
Yeah. Am I okay
Hey.
to just join
Hey.
audio?
Yeah. Yep, you sure are. So
Well, and I
Tracy
hate
and
to
I
be
were
so
just
late coming to the party. I know Tracy's doing a great job, but yeah, I'm very
yeah.
thankful for what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so we were just wrapping up, obviously, political corruption and poison power with first place losers. Um, but I know you wanted to talk about a little bit on the illegal immigration, and I also know you have some upcoming events coming up next week. So why don't you go ahead and start on the few items that you wanted to bring to the table?
Okay. Yeah, having a roundtable in
We lost him.
Oh, we lost him. Having a little bit of technical difficulties in the travel world.
that's coming basically promote illegal immigration. And what you find is that Utah, even though it's not a border state, it's a border state to all the other border states. Arizona, New Mexico, almost California. And as those states are pushing, to get to move non-citizens out of their states, Utah is a welcoming state. And so we end up with, and I've said it before, we're a magnet for illegal immigration, but not only that, a magnet for non-citizens with criminal intent because of our policies that we set. And so the same money that is pushing the illegal immigration effort is the same money that funded all of the election stuff, the CTCL and the CEIR and the ERIC, Electronic Records Information Center, and all of these things that are designed basically to steal an election. And I've told people, you don't just steal an election because you want to steal an election. You steal an election because you want to affect things on a much broader level. And, an America First candidate is going to stand in the way of that. And so they have ways of, structuring these elections so that you'll never get an America First candidate. And that's kind of what we're dealing with. I think at the bottom, or at the end of the day, we're dealing with this level of corruption on Utah's elections that favor someone who's willing to play that, that corrupt game. That's what you've got with Spencer Cox. That's why we end up with, candidates that people are just like, how in the world would Utah elect somebody like that? Well, they don't. Those people get selected and the elections are all lined up behind them, whether it's just lots of money, lots of propaganda, or actual manipulation of the election results, whatever it takes, those candidates will get in there. And this is why, what Tracy is doing and what I'm doing with that Supreme Court case it's so significant because nobody's ever pushed back. You know, you just get to the end and you say, gosh darn it, you know, we gave it a college try and we did our very best. And, you know, maybe we can come back in 4 years. Well, we're saying we're not coming back in 4 years. We're going to see this one through for 2024. And as we do that, more and more of this comes to light. And it's important. You turn on a national scene. And I think going to become more important as we disclose or expose that's going on. Am I even
Yeah,
there?
I agree. I think it's worse and worse.
And you know, Phil, you made up like a valid point on what you were talking about or what they hope, you know, the citizens of Utah would want to do. It's like, let's just sweep it on the rug and, you know, let's fix it for the next election. But it's not like that. We have to keep fighting for the 2024 election. I mean, our decision, our votes on the ballot was stolen from us because they're misinterpreting SB 54 in the way that they've been doing it, probably like Tracy was saying, for, you know, a number of years to their advantage. And it's you know, it's like all of this poison power where they're hoping that we're just going to go away. But quite honestly, it is making us stronger because we are fighting harder and harder and harder. And I think the more that you're out there doing your roundtables, I think that the more eyes that you're awakening in the state of Utah for, you know, some people were asleep. Maybe they just didn't know. I don't want to say they didn't care. They just kind of assumed they were all good old boys, but
Mhm.
they're not good old boys. You know, liars and cheaters and first place losers, they never stop with that. So,
I do like your roundtables that you do, Phil, and you're having one December 12th at 8 o'clock, right? And
Right.
on
Yeah.
Thursday.
Sorry, I think I must have cut out on you when I was in the middle of my amazing speech there, but
no, we heard you.
you get the gist. I mean, this is manufactured. These problems are not organic. They're made on purpose. So.
Well, and you've got so many of, you know, even like the Republicans, but so many of the legislatures that are just trying to like sweep it under the rug. I can't for the life of me. I don't understand why they're not fighting for you
Well,
because they
that is the
know it's
big,
wrong.
yeah, and the reason they're not fighting is because they're part of the system. The system that you think that they would fight against is the system that they are protecting
Mhm.
because it serves them.
Yep.
And I think even those that don't really understand it instinctively can tell that there is opposition if you go against certain individuals. And if you want to win an election, there are certain people that you connect with. And I don't know. So it's kind of instinctive, even for those that they may not be corrupt in their hearts, but they understand what it takes to win an election in Utah, and that it's largely a selection process more than an election process.
You're right, Phil, because they even did that in the state central committee. When I went, I was invited to talk about your case and explain it, so the state central committee could like try to help and tell them, no, this is our party. You're not telling us who we nominated. But you could see it in that. Like you could see, I know some of those people voted against to hear me speak, even though
Right.
I know that their hearts aren't bad. But if they voted for me, I think they felt like they would feel the wrath.
Well, and there are leaders who, you know, kind of thought leaders, and they stand up and you know, speak against you or speak in favor of some other policy. And a lot of those that are there are looking to them and saying, you know, I agree with them, and I'm going to take sides without really knowing what they're even taking sides on.
Yep, I agree.
And I don't know how much you heard of what I was saying before, but that's what's so important about this case is that we're not going away on 2024 and just saying, well, we'll come back next time, we'll give it our best shot. But we're going to continue to fight and expose this election. And that's what I said in the debate with Spencer Cox when I was asked, will I accept the results of the election? I said, I'll verify. And I knew that that was not a, but
Oh, we lost him.
that was not a benign response. That was that meant we were going to go the distance and verify this election.
So, Phil, what are the people who voted for you out there? We see a big presence with you on social media. Actually,
Can you
you're
hear
kind
me?
of making it.
Yeah.
You're making it all across the United States. I see on a lot of podcasts, a lot of platforms. But so the people who voted for you, like, can you hear us? Oh, we might have just lost him. He'll be joining us again. His Utah's immigration policy, the roundtable with Phil Lyman, is Thursday, December 12th at 8 p.m. It's at Bella's Fresh Mexican Grill. The address of those of you who are out that way is 2651 North 1850 West, and that is Far West Ogden. 8 o'clock next Thursday, December 12th. We truly hope that you can be out there. I know for some people it's quite of a drive, but we all know that Phil needs as much support as we can, and we're grateful to Bella's Fresh Mexican Grill to be hosting Phil at their restaurant. So it looks like we lost him for now, Tracy. Um, we could probably go ahead and wrap this one up. What do you want to say uh, as we close out?
Um, what I would like to say is prayer. I believe in the power of prayer. And I would just ask that everybody that watches or is following this movement and watching Phil and just pray and just pray for the understanding of those that are in positions that they can make this right, and that they would be able to understand what they're supposed to do and give them courage, because Phil is probably, he has impressed me because he has courage. He stands up, and if he knows it's wrong, he knows it's wrong. And I do. I think we're going to fix our elections this time.
I do too. And you know what? Phil fights for the people.
Mhm.
He fights to do what is right. Um, for each and every one of us, even for the people that didn't vote for him.
Yeah.
He is still fighting for them to
Yeah.
get Utah back to its conservative values and truly be the red state, which, I mean, you look at when you see the map of how many states went red. Tracy, what color was Utah, sadly?
We shifted blue.
Yeah,
So,
and a lot of it is just some of the people, honestly, that are moving in from other states. We don't know if they're illegals or not. I have a feeling we're gonna get to the bottom of it, but sadly, Utah shifted blue. One of the things, before we wrap up, when I first met Jason Preston, this was back in probably 2018, 2017 at Allison Salisbury's house. She had a party and Jason and Alexia were there. And Jim and I had actually moved here in 2015, but we really weren't like politically involved per se. And Jason, I started talking to him and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, people are here are so nice," and they still are. And I said, "They seem like they have they're very conservative." And he looked at me, he goes, "Lori," he goes, "You're gonna be taught a lesson here in very short order." And I kid you not, within 6 months, my husband and I were just like, "You've gotta be kidding me." Like, we never saw it coming because I think so many people from other areas of the United States always think that, "Oh my gosh, they're conservative," And a lot of it is because there are a lot of believers. There's Mormons and there's Methodists and there's Catholics, and they just feel like we're this Christian state, but there are a lot of backstabbers
uh-huh.
and a lot of first place losers.
And a lot of first place
But
losers.
I'll give you the closing statements before we go. So final statement, Tracy.
Well, tune in to Poison Power. Keep watching. We'll keep sending out educational videos. And also tune in next week for December 12th to see Phil, because we might even have what has happened with the Supreme Court case then, because they're supposed to respond by then. So
Oh, that would be awesome. Oh, and Poison Power now has an X platform, so you can follow us on that as well as the Rumble channel that you're on right now. I know Tracy's doing a lot of posting. We're all doing a lot of posting. I want to give thanks out there to Stephanie Wilcox and Jill Watson. They work really hard behind the scenes trying to keep this platform going. So please spread the word. Rumble channel, Poison Power. You can now find us on X, also Poison Power. We have an email at info@poisonpower.com.
yep.
So you can send us an email and one of us will get back with you. If if you have any upcoming thoughts on what you would like for us to do on some of these live videos, please send us an email. But good night for now, everyone, and keep fighting for Phil Lyman. And we'll get back with you on the next update on SCOTUS. Thank you, Tracy, so much. Have a